The long and the short of it, in Hartford, an American woman takes over top spot. All this and more on Up and Down.
Play Better Golf, a Score Golf Collector's Edition magazine, features the very best in golf instruction from the publication's 30-year history. Learn from Weir, Ames, Kane, Knudsen, and the great Mo Norman. Available only on newsstands.
Hey everyone, we are back for another edition of Up and Down. You know us by now, Peter Robinson and Jason Logan. And Peter, your beloved English football squad, sadly out of the World Cup.
I am telling you, there is not a bigger heartbreak story in all of sports. Even Phil Mickelson, and it took him, over a decade to win a major championship, than the England football team, soccer team. It's terrible.
Agreed. Continue.
Our first segment this week is Off the Fence.
Have you made your decision?
Jason, will Cristie Kerr's ascension to the top ranking in women's golf do a damn bit of difference to raise the profile of the LPGA Tour?
Well, let me first say that it is significant that she has risen to number one because she's an American. So this is a game that's largely been dominated by the Asian contingent in recent years. And with the world rankings, I think, having developed in 2006, it's the first time an American has officially been on top. But I think you'd probably have to go back to the early 90s to find an American woman who even topped the money list. Maybe Betsy King, I don't know, but it's been a long time since an American was number one, either officially or unofficially. However, Peter, it's probably the wrong American. And what I mean is there's very few women golfers who move the needle, and it is unfortunate. A couple of them are Annika Sorenstam and Lorena Ochoa, and they're retired. And the other two are probably Michelle Wie and maybe Paula Creamer. So I think if Michelle Wie had risen to number one, then yes, it would increase the profile.
I would perhaps put Morgan Pressel on.
Perhaps Morgan Pressel and Paula Creamer. I don't think Cristie Kerr is going to do it. It's just because she's viewed as not one of those young, dynamic players. So I guess the answer is no.
Yeah, there's 2 points I'd like to make to this, and that is that the LPGA Tour is the biggest problem, in addition to Ochoa and Sorenstam retiring, is their stop and start schedule. It's the worst thing in the world for a sports property to sort of go away and be out of sight, out of mind, especially a sports property that's trying to gain viewers rather than sort of sustain its market hold. But the second point is basically an extension of yours, is that it's the wrong American. Let's be honest. If it was Michelle Wie, it would be great news. Perhaps Paula Creamer, perhaps Morgan Pressel. Cristie Kerr has a prickly side to her, let's be frank. And if the profile of the LPGA Tour ever increases to the point where she's sort of the number one person to talk to in that, eventually I have my suspicions that prickly side is going to come to the fore, and that's not going to be a good thing.
And let's face it, there's going to be a lot of people that watch this that don't particularly like Michelle Wie, but that's not really the issue here. She's such a big personality and she's so well known that if she was number one, lots of people would be tuning in either because they like her or because they loathe her. We don't know.
To sum it up, if Cristie Kerr becomes the next sort of face of women's golf, I'm not sure there's much growth there like there would be with Michelle Wie or perhaps one or two others.
She did duck us both at London Hunt a few years ago. So.
She has ducked me more than once.
Our second segment this week is Question of the Week.
I want to ask you a bunch of questions. I want to have them answered immediately.
Paul from Vancouver emails in and says, what did you guys make of Corey Pavin nearly winning in Hartford at 50 years old?
Well, again, I mean, it can't happen on every course in the PGA Tour, but for the probably the shortest hitter.
Not probably. I would say the shortest hitter.
On the PGA Tour, to be in the running right till the very end and, in fact, get into a playoff against the longest hitter, and 50 years old versus, I don't even know how old Bubba Watson is, in his early 30s, I believe. And then a guy who fits in roughly in between with roughly a mixture of those two games. I mean, it's golf's greatest strength. You can't ask where else in any other sport, although I guess the Blue Jays got hammered by a 47-year-old pitcher yesterday. But, I mean, where else do you see that in the world of sports? It's amazing. And the thing that sticks out in my mind, and people won't know this unless you were there, but Corey Pavin was 49 years old last year at the Canadian Open at Glen Abbey, a course that generally favors really long, maybe not long hitters, but good iron play.
Well, when it's wet, you got to get the ball out there.
He was 40 yards behind Mike Weir every shot, and Mike Weir's by no means a long hitter. Sure, he finished only middle of the pack, but just to see him play that golf course with his game, it's an amazing thing for me, and I worry that people get so sort of too caught up on the long hitter, especially that the long hitter ended up winning. It would have been so nice for Pavin to win, although it was obviously not.
Well, you're precisely right. You've stolen the words right out of my mouth. But I will first say a couple of points here. You and I debated on the show a few weeks ago which would be the better story, for an old vet to win or for a young guy to win. And I think what you just said here is it doesn't matter, because that is golf's greatest strength, that old guys and young guys can compete and virtually finish at the same score. And then a long bomber and a short hitter can do the same. And I think the interesting thing is people will make that contradiction between Pavin and Watson all day long today, but they are also very similar in that they're the two guys that probably move the ball from side to side more than anybody else on tour. And Bubba Watson does not hit the ball straight. He never hits the ball straight. And to your point about watching Corey Pavin play at Glen Abbey last year, I mean, this is a guy that stands on the tee and hits like 240-yard cut drivers to lay up short of a bunker that everybody else is blasting over.
Without thinking about blasting.
Exactly. And if you're lucky enough to go to the Montreal Championship coming up this weekend, or if Corey Pavin goes to St. George's, and I suspect he will, I don't know for sure, do yourself a favor and watch this guy for 4 or 5 holes, because it is remarkable. And I realize the Champions Tour course will be shorter than a PGA Tour track, but it is remarkable to watch this guy and his shot-making abilities, and I thought it was great to see him in the mix.
And it's nice to watch, for just to watch, but it's also one of the rare examples where you can watch a PGA Tour pro and actually derive some things to your own game, because he basically plays kind of like an amateur against the pros in it, and he makes up the difference by being smart out there.
You're not comparing yourself to a U.S. Open champion, are you?
No.
Last word?
My last word is the Montreal Championship this week. It's the start of, I believe, 4 big-time tour events in Canada in about a 7 or 8 week period. A Canadian has not done well on the Champions Tour in quite some time, but there are signs that Jim Rutledge, who came, I think, 12th last week, is starting to play better, so he could be a guy to watch.
Yep. And my last word is, again, to plug our instruction issue that is on newsstands this week. It's called Play Better Golf. It's a Score Golf property. Mike Weir is on the cover. You got a Mike Weir wedge lesson in there. Swing sequences of some of the greats such as Mo Norman and George Knudson and Nick Westlock, and all kinds of brand new instruction. Check it out.
And it's the single biggest reason why Jason has had bags under his eyes for the last 7 weeks.